So your pentatonic scales are sounding rather pentatonic, you say? Well, that's because we took two of the notes from the major scale to create the pentatonic scale. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link above and it'll show you exactly where the pentatonic scale comes from. But the pentatonic scale is fantastic in that it reduces the chances of creating a dissonant sound, or a sound that doesn't go well over all the chords in your chord progression. But what if you want to use those chords? When would you know to use those, notes? And over which chord? Well, that's what we're going to show you today. So let's get on the tools. What we have here is the circle of fifths dial, the fretboard escalator, and the chord and lead generator. And I've set them to the key of C major. So that's C underneath the upper Roman numeral 1. It's also the relative minor key of A minor. And if you don't know what I mean by relative minor, then I'll leave a link above and it'll show you the basics of how relative minors work. They're really easy as well. But nonetheless, we are in the key of C major for this. So I've laid out the fretboard escalator with the C underneath the 1, or the tonic of the scale, for the key of C major. I've also left the highlighting of the 1, the 3, and the 5. That corresponds with our 1 chord. Our 1 chord is C major. Okay, so while you're playing the C major chord, you would want to target the 1, the 3, and the 5. And if I cover up the rest of the pentatonic scale across the fretboard, you instantly recognize this pattern. So you would target the 1, the 3, and the 5. They're going to sound the most pleasing, I suppose, or the most resolved when it comes to playing single notes over top of the chord. If you don't know what I mean about single notes over top of a chord, I'll leave another link in the video above to take you back to the feeling of how different notes or different intervals sound over top of chords. So that takes care of our 1 chord quite nicely, because the 1 chord is made up of the 1, the 3, and the 5 of the scale, as you know from previous lessons. But what happens when we get to our 4 chord? So the 4 chord is the next one in the progression. Well, let's see. So we look at our 4 chord plate here. These just come on and off, and you can change them depending on whatever your chord progression is. And the notes that make up the 4 chord are 4, 6, and 7. So looking back to here, we've got 4 here, right? And that is going to create an F major chord. So if you played 4, 6, and 1, didn't mean to say 7, 4, 6, and 1, anywhere on the fretboard escalator, together you're going to make yourself an F major chord. So while that F major chord is playing and you are soloing, or you're creating just a little bit of background, or making up a riff or whatever, you want to probably land on or emphasize the 4, the 6, or the 1. So if we look at our basic shape here, and we need to look for a 4, because that is actually the root of F major. The 4 in this scale is missing. So that's a whole note that you're missing out on being able to play during the 2nd chord in this progression. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to put a yellow peg where the 4 is supposed to be. And as we know from previous lessons, link above, if I think to do it, your major scale has 2 half-step intervals between 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. So between 3 and 4, we are going to place, or after the 3, we're going to place our missing 4 here. So now, during the 4 chord, which is F major, you can play these yellow notes, and that would be a 4 of the interval. So play your regular pentatonic scale and try those notes. See how they feel. See how they sound. Well, great. Okay, so perfect. Now, what happens when you come to your 5 chord? So the 5 chord, again, we have another problem. It's a 5, 7, and 2. Those 3 intervals make up the 5 chord, which is a G major. So when you're playing over the G major chord, you want to target the 5, the 7, and 2. We want to resolve on them, or you want to just emphasize them. So let's cover up the shape, or cover up and leave us with our regular shape here. We've got the yellows still in as our 4s, but we've got a 5 here, and we've got a 2 here, but we don't have a 7. So go back to our half-step list. 3 and 4, 7 and 1. Let's drop our 7s in. So right beside the 1, we've got a 7. Everywhere you see a 1, you've got a half step away to make your 7. Now let's cover this up. Okay, pretend that the yellow is not there and you're playing or soloing over the 5 chord, which is G major. You're going to want to target the regular pentatonic scale that you can see laid out there, plus the red ones. Okay, and those red ones are 7s. Great. Easier said than done. It's very difficult. It's not something you're going to do instantly. And when I demonstrate this to you, I'm not going to play any riffs. The intent is to listen to how those tones sound over top the backing track chords. I'll leave you to create your own riffs. So what I'm going to do is fill up the rest of this fretboard with the yellows beside the 3s and the reds by the 1s. I'm just going to go line by line or string by string here. You'll notice now that after I've added in the 4 and the 7, we've built out the full major scale again. And if you look, it creates this beautiful pattern where your 7 is always 1 fret down and 1 over. And then your 3 is always 1 fret down and 1 over from your 7, until of course you hit the line where you have to change on the B string, but then after that it repeats again. So you have these beautiful patterns that are starting to come alive in your mind. So now let's take a look at each shape. So that's one common shape. You might include that 7 there in that shape. And then what some people might call the major shape is beside it. You can include that 3 if you want, or you can just play it like this. And so on down the line, we've got all of these shapes that will tie together and give us 2 extra notes while we're playing the 4 or the 5 chord in this particular chord progression. So I also want to point out that we've got P for progression. This is your chord progression, 1, 4, 5. R is for the root of the chord that is created, so 1, 4, 5. And then the 3rd is the 3, 6, and 7. And then the 5th is the 5, 1, 2. That's what these letters are for. Okay. So next up, I'm going to just play the tones over top of the simplest backing track I could find, which is a nice, long, boring 1, 4, 5 backing track. Okay, so the first C is played for 2 measures. We're going to find a 1, a 4, and a 5 on the fretboard escalator that is going to be easy to play. So our 1 is here, and we know from previous lessons, I don't even have to look at the fretboard escalator, but that below the 1 is a 4, because the guitar is tuned in 4th. So always, if my 1 is here, I know that below it is a 4. Okay, and then 5 is a whole step over. So that's where I'll play this first column with a 1, 4, 5. Okay, so we're just finishing off the round here, and it's going to come back and do 2 measures of C. So the 1 and the 4 and the 5, the roots of the chord, they're going to sound good. Sorry, 2 rounds. Now 4. So the 4 is outside of the pentatonic scale. We would not have heard that. The 5's in the pentatonic scale. Back to the 1. So let's just listen to how they sound. 4. 5. Back to 1. Or we go to 1 up here. It's the beauty of just glancing down at the fretboard. It's going to go, oh, I got a 1 right there. I can try that out, see how it sounds. So we would have been missing that 4 had we just played the pentatonic scale. So let's go back, and we're going to work now on the 3rds. We did the roots of the chords. Now let's see how the 3rds sound. Now we can see already, had we just stuck to the pentatonic scale, that 7 wouldn't have been missing. Would have been missing. So let's see how that 7 sounds. So let's see what we would have been missing out on. Okay, we're in the F. So let's find ourselves a 3, 6, 7, an easy 3, 6, 7 place to play. So I've put my pinky back on my 1. I know my 3 is here, and underneath my 3 is my 6, and of course the 7 is 2 over. So I'm just going to go that simple L shape again. So that's interesting. The 3rd, that's the 6. It's the 6 of the 4 chord. 7, that we would be missing. Now back to the 3. Interesting sounds with the 3rd, so I'm just going to let you listen to it now on your own. 6, 7, back to 3. So great, we've just discovered how nice that 7 sounds over that 5 chord. So that's one I feel like we would have been missing out on. Let's go back here, and we're going to work now in the fifths. So root, third, fifths. This column is the fifths. So we're going to find a 5, a 1, and a 2 that's somewhere easy to play on the fretboard escalator. So let's take a look here. Let's find out. We got a 5, a 1, and a 2 here. That seems pretty easy. So pinky back on the root. I've got my standard shape. Here's my 5, here's my 1, and here's my 2. Okay? So 5, 1, 2. So let's let the chord progression come back around, and we're going to start with our 5. There's our 5. Still the 1 chord. Here comes the 4 chord with the 1. So it's the first scale degree over the 4 chord. There's the 2, second scale degree over the 5 chord. Let's just hear them now on their own. Remember, there's 2 measures here. Great, so we can see the 5, 1, and 2 were already in the pentatonic scale, so we weren't missing out on anything. But now we know what the fifths sound like over top of those chords. So you can just listen to this, you can just sort of start training your ear as to how things sound and see if you like it. All right, so I think that's about it for what I want to cover. Now the next steps are for you to take this to your guitar learning path. So it's an in-person lesson, or if you're working on some online YouTube lessons, or you've paid for whatever, but they will have been talking about adding these notes back in at some point, and using the fretboard escalator with this chord and lead generator and the circle of fifths dial means you don't have to constantly start your computer up and then go find a YouTube lesson or whatever. You could just sit down at any time, no computers, no phones, nothing. You just get this out, and you could either do a backing track or you could create your own backing track. Ideally, if you've got a looper pedal, that'd be great. Chord progressions are going to change. So if we start hanging up let's say it went to a minor 6. Well, the 6, 1, 3 is what you'd be targeting. Well, that's all within the pentatonic, so you're good to go. But let's say, for another example, there was a minor 3 in the chord progression. The 3, the 5, and the 7 wouldn't have been there. So it's giving you more options, and it helps you to visualize what you're going to target during your chord progressions. Well, I hope you found that helpful, and it helps you in your guitar journey. These tools make it really easy and makes it a lot more fun. You can take all of the knowledge that you're collecting from either the internet or your in-person instructor, and you can apply them to one thing. So ask your guitar teacher about it, ask your mentor, and see if they can lay something out for you, show you some riffs using these notes with a different chord progression than this, practice it in different keys, and off you go.